those people who denied their past. My foreparents, my grandparents, my mother, my father did not suffer and die to give me an education to slight, oppress, or discourage my people. Because whatsoever education I acquired out of those sacrifice of over 300 years, I shall use for the salvation of the 400 million black people of the world. And the day when I forsake my people, may God Almighty say there shall be no more light for you. I unequivocally rejected the racist assumption of much white American Christianity, namely that God had created the black man inferior and that he had intended Negroes to be a servant class, hewers of wood and vials of water. Well, I predicated my view of man on the doctrine of Imago Dei. All men, regardless of color, are created in the image of God. Now, from this premise followed the equality of all men and the brotherhood of all men. The biblical injunction of Acts 17:26 reminds us that he created of one blood all nations of men to dwell on the face of the earth. I was most interested in brotherhood within his own.
Many people recognize Marcus Garvey as having been, if not the, then amongst maybe the 2 or 3 most important African organizers and possibly the most important Africans of any description of the 20th century. So this is a remarkable man with an impact first in his birthplace, then elsewhere in the Caribbean region, then in the United Kingdom, then back in Jamaica, then in the USA, then back in Jamaica, and effectively worldwide. When Garvey came to politics, what he said he was doing was to look at the condition of his fellow Africans worldwide and to make sure that he understood it, and then to try to contribute to solving the situation as he found it. And what he says he found was that us African people worldwide were a subject of, quote, degradation everywhere. That was the word he used. And then Garvey said, and this is important, that there is another factor contributing to where we are, and that is a lack of racial solidarity, a lack of sense of who we are as a people, and a lack of a sense of knowing that we have to recognize ourselves as a people and act together in our interests as a people. He said that that was a result of white injustice. We would say white oppression, and we would say imperialism and colonialism and racism, that historical combination that we've been subjected to for the last 400 or 500 years, is the key producer of the disastrous state of affairs in which we find ourselves. Of course, I already told you that he founded the UNIA in Jamaica in 1914. Stony ground, right? The black population never had no money. Too few of them had voting rights. The qualification for voting was property and income, and too few of them had. So Garvey couldn't make no headway in Jamaica, no headway to that. So the first 2 years of the UNIA, which was in Jamaica, were fairly unsuccessful. And it was because he knew that there was something else was possible that he went off to the United States of America in 1916 to try, initially for the purpose of bringing resources from the US back to Jamaica. Garvey was an individual genius of sort, an organizing genius and a political theoretical genius, it seems to me. But he was aided by the particular circumstances which he found himself, not just the circumstances of colonialism, but particularly the circumstances of the First World War, which opened up all kinds of organizing possibilities, all kinds of movements of black people throughout the world, but particularly in the United States where he found himself, and in continental Africa where colonialism was busy mobilizing Africans to go and fight for them. And Africans were turning around and revolting against them, but some of them were also going off to fight. Not only was he referencing positive and important world developments among the world's working people, but he was also aiming his own political work within the African community at the bottom stratum and the middle stratum of Africans. He was speaking to people at the bottom of the society in a way that nobody else had done before. He knew about Jim Crow, the organized system of oppression of black people in the States. He knew about the pattern of lynching. He knew about the oppressive white organizations. He knew about the oppressive white local state and even the oppressive national state. And when he went around the United States doing his meetings, it is to that experience of concrete oppression that Marcus Garvey was drawing attention. Effectively, Garvey summarizes what his program of action is going to be. And he says, right at the beginning, that what we have to do is work through self-love, because we're coming out of a position of self-hate produced in us and in our heads by the racist system that we have lived through under colonialism, under slavery, under imperialism, that whole racist system that had put negative views about ourselves in our heads, and that we needed to move away from that and substitute for it a positive self-appraisal and a positive a positive sense of embracing ourselves as a people with a history. Garvey's UNIA was one of the few, probably the only major African organization in the West that had structured into it male-female co-leadership, right? Every UNIA had a branch, had a male chair and a female co-chair. Garvey attracted to him and recruited deliberately extraordinary women, starting with the first Mrs. Garvey, Amy Ashwood, and the second Mrs. Garvey, Amy Jade, who incidentally were friends. They fell out very... But its maximum position wasn't about the destruction of capitalism and imperialism. Its maximum position was about African self-organization and the end of colonialism. And so, in a way, the maximum achievement of Garvey is the independent African state. In other words, the neo-colonial state. And his creed and action around our organization through self-love has also to some extent not succeeded, because in practice in the world we are not mobilized as a people, conscious of our past, conscious of our position, conscious of the need to liberate ourselves from these very powerful forces that oppress us.